Okay, we're going to slowly get started, and I know a few more people might pop on. So I want to thank all of you for joining, and I really want to thank Shanti Davis Center and Sunny for hosting tonight, and all the people that made this possible. So a few things I want to share that Sunny may have shared on the, they have a page where you can get materials. I just want to talk a little bit about the course is listed as kind of, how do we get ourselves prepared for death? And I forget the actual title, but it's also about Lojong. So I'm weaving through, and I'm going to focus a lot more on that. The Lojong, a special Lojong text. Lojong is mind training. It means mind training or mind transformation. That sounds pretty cool, right? Lo mind, Jong training. And so they asked me to teach a course like this through mind training, which is a way to see our reality. And how about if we see it a little differently than how we're seeing it? Now, if it's working for you the way you're seeing it, wonderful karma, and that's great. But there are times the problems arise, right? And how do you deal with the problems? You doing really well with that? And it can be like little mundane problems. You know, when you notice that the sink's leaking or you drop something, and what does your mind do right away? Can you kind of take that mind that might get annoyed? Not everyone does, but some people do. And we want to examine that, kind of see, when we deal with suffering, how does that work? So how does suffering, how can we fold that into the path on a relative level and on an ultimate level? Okay. And then what happens with happiness? We want happiness. So how does that work on a relative level and an ultimate level in order to get us prepared for death so that we die peacefully, prepared, and comfortably as possible? So that's what so it's a unique Lojong text. It's not the standard 8 verses of mind training, which is one of our standard Lojong texts. Some people talk about the 7 verses of thought transformation. Let me just turn this off. Yeah, mainline health, right? Okay. So that, and so we have the 7 verses of thought transformation as well, something separate. This is a very unique text that Rinpoche loves. And so I wanted to talk about that. And the text is shared in the chat, are some of these materials that Sunny just put up in the chat. And then another thing I shared was I was asked if there's a list of references or books. So I provided a list of books I put together of death and dying courses that I teach. And because I did a lot of hospice volunteer work in the past, and I still do, but through that I do a lot of death courses. Generally, it's of course kind of a specialty area from all that work. So I put together, it's a very long list, but with death and dying books, there's a bazillion of them. So what I did is over the years, I've kind of compiled Dharma, death and dying books, and they keep shifting, they keep changing and updating. And then I also added some other books. So is that in the, Sunny, is that also in the, is there a place where they can access that list? Sorry, you're muted. You're muted, Sunny.
I'm sorry.
There we
I'll
go.
put it up now.
Yeah, no problem, no worries. I just wanted to see if people can, and there's some interesting books on there that I might reference as well. And then I wanted to mention this book. Okay. So this is from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, How to Enjoy Death. How to Enjoy Death, which sounds kind of bizarre. Like people don't usually enjoy death. We've had so much death right now in the country from COVID that people are not at all enjoying, as we know. So, but this also says there's a byline here, subline, preparing to meet life's final challenge without fear. That's what we want. We don't want to be afraid of death and the experience. So this is a book that's a little bit like a death Bible. This happens to be, apparently there's an updated version of it that Wisdom Publications has published, and that's our publisher in Boston. You can find it online, but I'm a little confused because this is Wisdom Publications. I've looked at both books and they're pretty similar. So I'm not really sure. This book keeps getting updated all the time and it's really similar. So whichever one you have, I happen to have this one and I'm not going to buy the new one because I think this is quite similar. So, but what it also has is, first of all, the first parts are how to think about death from Rinpoche. And then the whole second half is practices and prayers, according to Buddhism, you can do for dying people, if you are dying, and how to get your mind ready like that. So it's really everything you need. The nice thing about it being in a book is one of the things I did, and I will discuss this more in future sessions, during the pandemic, I'd been meaning anyway myself just to update my death paperwork. And the pandemic was just perfect time to do it. So meaning like I have who my family should call that knows about my Dharma practice. I have the instructions written out for them. And what they have to do is all they need to do is grab this book and it's all referenced in the material like that. So you can kind of put some things together. It's something to think about. Is your paperwork ready? So we'll talk about some of that. Okay, so let's first put ourselves in the right mind space and just take a moment to lightly close your eyes. Just begin to notice your breathing. You might feel to increase your respiration, deepening it. We sometimes spend a lot of the day shallow breathing. And as you exhale, increasing that level of your exhalation, let go of the distractions right now. Let go of the various things you have to do or telling yourself you need to do. Just bring yourself more present into this space. So whoever's typing, can they stop typing? That would be great. Or just mute your microphone. Thank you so much. And let's consider our motivation. We probably set a motivation early in the morning, forgot about it all the rest of the day. Perfect time right now to reset that motivation. Because if we can make our mind more peaceful by practicing Lojong, mind training, in that preparation for this ultimate transition we will all go through. We've all been through it before, death. But if we make our mind more peaceful, we create more peace. Ripples of peace on the planet go out from our mind, from us. It makes other people more comfortable. And if you're really practicing to apply the Lojong principles, if you can do it on a daily basis or as much as possible, you can definitely accelerate your pace on this path to enlightenment. And then we're unlimited in helping all living beings. So if you'd like to explore that motivation, this idea of benefiting all living beings for a moment, what do you need to do to be in that place? And it's a place where you're infinitely happy, peaceful, so it's for that purpose to really help all living beings that we're going to talk about these topics this evening. And if we can, Sunny, can we share or actually, can I share my screen? Okay, great. I'm going to just bring up a couple of the COVID, the Shantideva prayers. I just want to do one that is nice to do before we start teaching. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, this is a different document than I had before. Okay, let's see. I can find here we go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So if you're near your computer and you can see this, praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. We're going to read this 3 times. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And let me see if it has oh, it doesn't have the mantra. Okay, this is a little different than the one I had. Anyway, we'll read this 3 times just to set us in a nice space. So imagining the Buddha in the space in front of you, golden radiant being. He's facing you. He's slightly higher than the level of your forehead on a radiant jeweled throne. You visualize him 6 inches in height or a little bigger if you like. Just imagine as if he's really there. Let's just recite this verse 3 times. And try to really think about the words. Feel free to join. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Shugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Shugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Shugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. So I'll just chant 3 times. You're welcome to join in the Shakyamuni Buddha's mantra. And imagine golden light rays coming from the Buddha's heart to your forehead, entering you and completely granting you all the blessings and realizations of his holy body, speech, and mind. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Thank you. Okay. Just as a question in general, what do you feel you need to do to get ready for death, to be peaceful at the death time? What are a couple of the main things that on a spiritual path that you really need to do? Any thoughts on that? Yes, Sunny.
Yes. When I imagine my death, it really helps if I can imagine what's going to happen. So the different phases, the different steps of the actual death process. That calms me, gives me comfort.
Right. We are going to do a meditation in another session on the visions, internal visions that actually arise when you're dying, according to Tibetan Buddhism. These are visions. These are actually visions that happen when you go to sleep every night. If you have a really big sneeze or a yawn or sexual orgasm, these visions actually arise, but they're very subtle. So we don't recognize them because we're not familiar with them. So there's meditations people do every day, especially with tantric initiation, that they go through these visions. So we're going to do that meditation, in another session. So Sunny's saying, if she can get ready to know what's going to happen and what visions, it's brilliant because then you're geared to recognizing those visions and being able to use them in a skillful way. That's why we meditate. It's really why we want to train to meditate now, not to wait, because at the death time, too many other things will be happening for you to start to get into meditation at that point. Meditation is not only a device to help you become friendly and comfortable with your mind, and I mean all aspects of your mind, okay? But it also sets you up for the death time so that you'll be able to actualize. The body is going to finish. The body will finish. And instead of being afraid and clutching onto it, okay, there's meditations you can do because you're not encumbered anymore by the body. As long as you train your mind in it, that's the thing. So thank you, Sunny. What other things come up for you? I'm just curious. The couple things you really need to do to get ready for death. What would you say?
I think maybe hi, Maureen, on a more mundane level. Hi. I think taking the fear out of dying. So realizing now, while I am alive and I have a human body and I had the potential to create my next rebirth by eliminating negative karma, by having those seeds that are ripening, and by looking at that and making better choices, making more virtuous choices, practicing the Dharma, that when the time of death comes, because we don't know when that will be, that I will feel, I won't look back and wish I had done something differently. So for me, that's.
Thank you, Maureen. Yeah, about not having regrets, and traditionally, which I don't know if I'll even get to in this course, but many of you've heard it. But I probably will go through the 9-point death meditation of just. And one of the things is the reason we want to do it is one of the advantages to thinking about death is so that we don't have regrets when we die. There's some people, they never want to think about it. It's always like, no, 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 as if it's not going to happen to them, right? But it is going to happen. It's the one thing you can count on, okay, is you're going to die, okay? And I'll couple that with change. The one thing you can count on is change. And death is a little bit more radical change. So if I'm working on that, realizing that now, I think about it every day. I kind of wake up with, it's not my only waking thought. It's not my only waking thought, but it's one of those initial thoughts of the day. This could be my last day. I want to grab it, so that's a nice thing about not having regrets and trying to practice Dharma. And what specifically about practicing Dharma is really key. Two things that'll get you so ready. What do you think? Leah, is it Leah?
Yes. This might be too obvious, but I don't know. Coming to the realization that we're not immortal in the first place.
Sure. That's true. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, and it's really hard, especially when you're younger, because you never think about it. You never really think about it. When you hit 50, everything's different after 50, right? Those of you that are over 50, it's suddenly like, you're like, oh, this is different. So thank you. But how about two, what are the wings of the bird that you need to fly to enlightenment?
Like wisdom and method.
Method and wisdom. Thank you, Maureen. Method and wisdom. So basically, if you're very focused now on thinking of others, and you are cultivating the right view of reality and spending time with emptiness, thinking about emptiness, reading about it, studying, meditating, learning how to meditate well on emptiness, those are the things that are going to get you ready. If you spend a lot of time doing that, that's the key. So all the other things you guys said are absolutely right on as well. But those two things really we need to continue to cultivate. And you know what? You start where you are. Like Pema Chodron's title, start where you are. You might say, well, I don't really, everything's tainted with my own self-absorption. Yes, for ordinary people, of course it is. But one time I mentioned that to Rinpoche years ago. And when I was living in California, we were talking about something, and I said, but Rinpoche, I don't have any bodhicitta. Method is bodhicitta. What's our way of doing it, right? Bodhicitta is, as Lama Yeshe would call it, totality heart. Fully open heart, directed on cherishing others more than yourself. That's what they call the enlightened attitude. Bodhi is enlightenment. Citta is mind, the mind of enlightenment. Okay, so you're working on that. And I said to Rinpoche, I don't have any bodhicitta. Everything I do is tainted with me, and Rinpoche swung around really quickly. We were walking up a hill, and he all of a sudden really turned to me really quickly, leaned in, and he said, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere, okay? So wherever we are, we're all at different levels here. You keep chipping away. So I was just doing retreat this past month, and it's hard. It's hard work. You're alone with your mind day in, day out, trying to do these meditations. The mind, some days fine, and other days completely uncooperative. So I'm kind of just rolling it all in. I'm like, okay, what's it gonna be today? And somehow I haven't been sleeping very well. So there was that dynamic, but it snowed all of February here. We had 4 snows I had to shovel, go out and shovel. No problem, it's good exercise, I like it. And it's beautiful, and I was so happy with the snow. But the last snow was really icy. So I was in a little bit of a down in the retreat. I was really not being happy with myself, and I was struggling. And I had to go out because there was another snow coming. No, it was the third snow. There was another one coming, and I had a big icy patch on the driveway skirt. And I knew if I didn't get it cleared, then the next snow I'd never get it managed. And it was supposed to be really cold. So I went out with an ice chipper that my dad had in the garage, thank God. I went out and it was hard. I'm chipping away, and it was fine. But suddenly, and when you're in retreat, you try to also use the break time. You're not just kind of, I'm in my session and then I leave and then I'm just ordinary, all my thinking about me. So I was kind of thinking about bodhicitta actually, and thinking like, and I'm reading, I don't know if any of you are reading Big Love, the book about Lama Yeshe. Anyway, read it. It's a very special book. So I'm in the second volume. It's a big book. It's a big 2-volume thing, but it's extraordinary. And I've been reading it. So I was thinking about Lama and Rinpoche and all their realizations and how far away I am from that. And I'm chipping away. And then suddenly the ice was breaking up. And I thought, it's like just ice cube by ice cube. You chip. You just have to keep chipping. And the next thing I knew, the driveway was cleared. So like when I looked at it all in the beginning, it was really hard. And I'm like, I could see my neighbors struggling with them and we were helping each other. And, but then suddenly you just keep working at it. So you have to do that and commit to yourself for your happiness and your well-being. And it's great for the planet. It's great for the planet. So we do our best. We do our best. So thinking about bodhicitta and emptiness, and we're going to talk about those as well. So looking at this text, turning suffering and happiness into enlightenment. Okay, Jigme Tempe Nima, who lived from 1865 to 1926, okay, was a Rinpoche, and this is his text. Okay, so I'm going to address some of this. And they always start out with homage. And this one is homage to the Buddha of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. And then there's a verse about, who feels distress when suffering. He who will ever be made happy by the happiness of others and who feels extreme distress when suffering comes to them, having fully attained the quality of great compassion, he will renounce his own happiness and sufferings. Okay, so think about that. Just think about that. Do you want to renounce? You want to give up your happiness? Who wants to do that? Okay, this is the path. This is the quicker path to enlightenment. Okay, it's not Tantra, I'm saying, but it's to think about giving up your happiness for others. Okay, it actually makes you happier. It becomes the point of your life. And you're not clutching on and waiting. And, I don't know if any of you ever read Plato, but I think Camus also had a sense of this where, when he wrote The Plague, and if you ever read The Plague, he, talks about how, people were, when you really love somebody, and Plato talks about this too, you're always in that moment worried about the next moment. Where, they both kind of dealt with that, worried about it. Is it going to last? Is it still going to be this? So you're never really experiencing the pure experience of your love or of your happiness like that. So we just really want to understand, but the more you give it away and really worry about other people's happiness, you become really kind of innately happy, okay? So he says, I'm going to write partial instruction on acceptance of happiness and suffering as the path, okay? And he says it's the most precious teaching in the world, a necessary tool for holy life, okay? Now here's the first part, the way of accepting suffering as the path to enlightenment. Can you imagine accepting suffering as the path to enlightenment? Nobody wants suffering. Nobody wants suffering. Who would want, people would think you're crazy. And the thing with Lojong texts is I don't readily discuss them with non-Buddhists or people that aren't really interested in Buddhism. Like, usually they're not even exposed to it. So that's not the kind of Buddhism I would talk to them about. If they say, what's Buddhism about? And, you know, it's about being happy. It's about helping others. It's, you know, it's about pacifying your mind, subduing your mind, you know, looking at what my mind's creating. I wouldn't start with like, oh, it's about, you know, being really happy when I suffer and asking for more suffering. They wouldn't, people don't get it. But once you're practicing for a bit, so here it talks about by means of relative truth. So we know with emptiness, we have two truths. There's a relative reality, sometimes called conventional reality, and in another sense, sometimes called mistaken reality, okay? And there is an ultimate truth, emptiness. Emptiness refers to a lack of inherent nature, a lack of inherent nature. Inherent nature is very difficult for us to get a grasp of. These are not words we've heard readily in our education. Inherent means, and I'll give you some synonyms, intrinsic, independent, concrete, concretely existing, solidly existing, existing with its own character from its own side. These are all synonyms of inherent nature. We're not that familiar with it though. However, the way we feel about ourselves is often for most people with an ordinary consciousness, an inherent sense of ourselves, that we exist strongly. There's a very strong sense of I, meaning myself, I, and anything that threatens that, anything that interrupts that, the agenda of that I, anything that threatens any loved one of that I, you know, we tend to have a very strong reaction that comes out of our throat like an inherent, solidly existent, independent, concrete thing. And it doesn't exist like that at all. It's a big mistake, okay? It's the fundamental mistake of an ordinary consciousness, okay? So we're right now going to look at the relative truth. The relative truth is you are sitting here in a class. You're on a Zoom program. You know, you have to take care of your being, your body and mind. You know, that is sitting in a chair or watching this and listening, and you need to take care of it. You can't just say, well, you said it didn't exist. No, the inherent nature of you doesn't exist, that inherent I. But there is a conventional I, a relative I, that, you know, goes to sleep at night and wakes up in the morning and needs food to eat. And, you know, so this is the one we're first going to look at, this relative truth. How do I accept suffering as a relative truth to prepare me for death? And then we'll talk more also about death and things like that. So problems are going to arise for you. It's life in samsara, sorry to mention, okay? And here it says, whenever harm comes to you, from a being or a non-being. A non-being is, you know, there's an earthquake and the building falls down on your head, okay? If your mind experiences sorrow, and it could even be, you know, a small incident leading to great mental pain, like that, you notice these are things that happen. We have mundane suffering. You stub your toe, okay? And then we have bigger suffering, that you get COVID, you have a loved one in the hospital on a ventilator with COVID, or losing somebody, when someone dies, losing your job, having financial problems, having poor health. We all know what those are, okay? So what happens is when we're glommed on to the sorrow and the suffering over and over and over, okay, we habituate our mind in that. We habituate our mind more and more that suffering is a problem, that I want it to go away. I want it to go away. And here he goes on, for it's in its nature that any consciousness, either of suffering or happiness, will increase by experiencing the suffering. Like that, if the experience gradually becomes stronger, a time will come when most of what appears will be the cause of drawing unhappiness to ourselves. So again, when you wallow in your suffering, And what happens is you start to create a pattern in your mind of negativity. Oh, woe is me all the time. Now, we all know people. We know people with really bad health. I know some people like this. They're happy. Their manifestation is they never talk, they never complain, they never tell you how horrible they feel, right? And they're very focused on you. How are you doing? You know, I've been in like late stage cancer patients' rooms. They're still conscious that some of them really evolved. Like, really, how are you doing? You know, in all the hospice work, I think of it. And then there's some people, just small problems and everything's horrible. Everything's horrible. No gratitude, no nothing. They have every advantage, no problems at all. And everything is a problem. Every time they turn around, there's a problem. And they're miserable. So we all know people like that in both of those places. So again, we don't want to continue to the cause. I like how it says the cause of drawing unhappiness to ourselves. Okay. And you'll never give happiness a chance. Never give happiness a chance. So if you do not know that the responsibility lies within one's own mind, one's own mind's way of experiencing, and instead you're putting the blame on the external objects alone. And then it says that the ceaseless flame of suffering and anger, which create bad karma, increases. Okay. So this is called appearances arising in the form of the enemy. This is our suffering. Okay. But again, Buddhism's premise is everything comes from the mind. Everything comes from the mind. Okay. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, almost a mantra he's often saying, everything comes from the mind, everything comes from the mind. These teachings from the Buddha. Okay. So unfortunately, we have influences around us that like to blame externally. The key part, I think the key component that makes you a Buddhist, the key component that makes you a Buddhist, we would say, is that you become an inner being. You know, a lot of people say, what makes you a Buddhist? Well, you have refuge. You think about bodhicitta. You have an altar with offering bowls. And no, the real key is that you're an inner being. And what that means is whatever's arising in externally to me, whatever I'm experiencing actually, right? And, you know, if it's happiness, you might just be going through it and going, this is wonderful. And, you know, but if it's suffering, that's when we have more of a negative response and more of an agitation. Okay. So what you're doing as a Buddhist is you're always looking at your mind. How come I'm really happy right now? What's going on? Who am I around? What am I doing? What am I thinking about? How come I'm really miserable right now? You know, what's going on? Who's around me? What just happened? What am I thinking about? Because all of that experience is coming from your mind. And then the more gentler we can be with it, then we start having an easier run with the suffering like that. And I remember it was so significant for me at that point. This is many years ago in California. But before I was a nun, I lived at the center with my boyfriend, Vajrapani. We lived there together. And then I introduced him to Rinpoche. And then he became a second attendant for Rinpoche as a lay person. But Rinpoche had only had monks around him as attendants like that for the most part. And so then I had incredible attachment to him, my boyfriend, that he was going to become a monk and what was I going to do? And, you know, and that was a real, cause of suffering for me for a bit. And then, but then there were times I was really happy. Like I wanted him to be with Rinpoche. I introduced him and I was really happy, and if he really wanted to be a monk, I certainly wasn't going to stand in his way like that. So at one point he was traveling mostly with Rinpoche, and then he would come home for like a couple of weeks, once in a while, every few months. And, but we got into a routine and it was working really well. And he was convinced that we could do this relationship as lay people with him being the attendant. He, it was unusual, but he was really going for it. So at one point, everything was going along swimmingly well. And then I was at a teaching and I was an appointment with Rinpoche, and somehow something shifted, and it was something related to my boyfriend, or he something shifted and I had some expectation about something and it didn't happen. And then he had to go off with Rinpoche and I was like, you know, wah, wah. And so, and then later Rinpoche asked me about what was the change. And he said to me really ardently, so what changed? He kept saying to me, so what changed? You know, I was discussing with him how suddenly I wasn't happy from this thing. You know, I didn't even name the incident. I just said, and suddenly I wasn't happy. Like everything was great until then. And he said, so like getting me to look at what was it that changed in my mind? And it was so powerful for me because I could see exactly the trajectory and I could see it was my self-cherishing. Self-cherishing. Again, so when I mentioned, and what Maureen had said is method and wisdom, method again, bodhicitta, okay, is about cherishing others. It goes against self-cherishing. That's the obstacle to self-cherishing. Not the obstacle, that's the cure for self-cherishing, okay? So I could see that all this sitting in my mind, what I needed, what I wanted, I had an expectation this was gonna happen. That, you know, it was all about me. And the more I thought about him and what he was doing and how difficult it was to travel with Rinpoche, and you got very little sleep and going all around the world and having to keep all these, you know, balls in the air in a sense. If I thought about that, then I was quite happy. And when he would come back from the trip and just wanted to sleep for like a day, you know, and I was excited to see him, but I could just support him and be happy, you know, be like, what do you need? What can I help you with? Like that. So think about the ways how this enemy of suffering rears its head, and then we solidify it, and then we make it external. It's not going to be helpful when you're dying. But we have to start practicing now. We have to start practicing now. And if anybody has picked up the book Big Love, the thing that was really, that one of the things that's so impressive to me is it's the whole history of Lama Yeshe's life and then how the FPMT got started and all the beginnings of the centers, our different centers. And it's really moving. But the sacrifice of these students, let alone Rinpoche and Lama, but the sacrifice of the students who were hippies, basically in the 60s and 70s, their sacrifice, and I know what they did at Vajrapani, and I know some of the ways, sorry, I knew he was gonna call, it's my brother. He always calls in the middle of the teaching, okay. We have great timing, he's great. So I felt like I knew the work, you know, I was doing at centers in the 90s and beyond that, but that original incredible sacrifice of those students, they were just going for it. They were just totally going for it. As far, everything was the Dharma. Everything was to set up these centers, to have Dharma teachings. The work they did in the book, it's staggering. It's staggering the stuff they were doing. I mean, I'm kind of blown out. Now I know how I've worked at centers as well, but that dedication they had was really impressive. And one of the concerns is, some of us have talked about this, some of my friends, and is, you know, they say that we're in a degenerative time now. And some of the signs of that are that it gets harder to practice and people aren't really devoting themselves like that. They're not willing to make the sacrifices. They're not willing to go to that length. It just, times change. You know, I've seen it in my own mind of certain things. So it's kind of, you know, but the people that really are going for it, they said it's like getting through the eye of a needle. That you can shoot through that little, it's a little narrow space, but if you want enlightenment and you want to realize emptiness and you want to get bodhicitta and make progress, you can get through there. But it's narrowing, the space is narrowing, but it is possible. So it's something that I find the book really inspiring for that, reminding me. And another thing that's really helpful in general, to get yourself ready for death, please, you do need to do some retreat every year. You first need to learn how to meditate, okay? And try to start with some short group retreats, when we can do that again and we're in person, like it's a weekend, or you might spend a day with yourself and get a meditation book and just go through some of the exercises. But learn how to do that, to bring that into your practice as a balance and a huge support for your mind, please. It's really, really helpful, because I just find for me, you know, I had a month's retreat, and sometimes I've done longer or shorter, but I see the value of it, of how helpful to balance and to give me new perspective and for renewal, spiritual renewal. So enormously helpful. So I can't stress that enough, that, and don't worry if you're bumbling along in the beginning with meditation, because here's the thing, we're all bumbling along. Like, don't think because I'm a nun and I've been at this for 30 some years, it doesn't matter. We're all bumbling along. So you try, and you're basically sitting quietly, and things start to come up in the mind, and you start working with them. And then you learn some tools of meditation of, what am I working with specifically? What do I want to meditate on now? What topic? Or do I want to just focus on one thing and get that concentration clear? So there's different types of meditation, but really, really important to get yourself ready for the death time. It's interesting because my siblings have said that they're really glad that I've done some retreat, because I'm used to being alone in silence and quiet. And there are a number of people I know with COVID, in the COVID time, that are very lonely, have been very lonely in this lockdown, in the quarantine. They're either living alone or, and so for me, it was just like a little bit being in retreat sometimes, but I just did more formal retreat. But I feel like, you know, and so they've said, well, we're cool that you're good on your own, that you're fine. And I know with the retreat, just, you know, I tried to get off all the technology and things, and there's not TV. You know, occasionally I listen to the radio like 5 minutes or something, but just to have the quiet. So I felt like at one point I got to this point saying, I'm really glad I'm comfortable with the aloneness that's different than loneliness, the aloneness, because when I'm dying, that's what's going to be there. And if I'm okay with it now, and I'm just okay to be quiet and not, you know, then I'm used to that. I'm familiar with that. And so the first times I did solo retreat, it was really hard. And each time it's easier and easier, because you're more familiar, you know, that space like that. So just continuing on, and I'll take some questions at the end. We go till 8:30. You should thoroughly understand the reason why sentient beings of the dark age are afflicted by suffering is fundamentally related to the weakness of their discriminating awareness. Therefore, not to be hurt by the obstacles of enemies, illness, and harmful spirits does not mean that we can drive away vicissitudes such as illness and that they will not occur again. So he's referring, and I understand he's a person of color, the Tibetan, but the dark age is what we call a degenerative time. That's the age we actually are living in right now. So he's referring to that of, these are the things where people don't have, they're not meditating on emptiness. They're not thinking about emptiness and studying emptiness, the nature of reality. So everything's very concretized in our view and in our world system like that. So we're not spending the time. And so when you're afflicted with suffering, you concretize that as well. You understand, and you know some people where they were wronged by someone. It's happened to all of us. It's happened to all of us, whether somebody intentionally did it or whether they unintentionally did it, it was a mistake. But some people hold a grudge. They solidify it more. You know, they make a big deal of it and they never let it go. And then it just holds you hostage. You make this big concrete block in your mind, okay, because you didn't really understand karma and emptiness. You didn't understand that the reason your boss yelled at you, the reason this person broke up with you, okay, is there's a karmic seed in your mind that caused that. That's the only reason, according to Tibetan Buddhism. That's it. There's nobody out there doing it to you. There's no conspiracy that, you know, that, and nobody breaks up with you because you're not good enough. You have Buddha nature. So you're way good enough. You're way good enough, okay? But of course and people say, I felt rejected. I felt rejected. That's a device of our normal, ordinary, limited thinking, that you feel rejected. Somebody doesn't want to be with you. Karmic seed is there that I'm not going to be with this person. It's a different way. So mind training is a different way we want to look at it. It's a different way we want to look at it. And we have to keep applying it. So granted, it doesn't mean you're not hurt if somebody breaks up with you. It doesn't mean you're not grieving when somebody close to you dies. Not at all. But you see it for what it is, so that it doesn't end up lingering forever, making you either a victim or making you just completely miserable all the time and depressed. Certainly after you lose a loved one, there's going to be a passage of depression. So, I mean, I'm living in my parents' house and they're gone. And during the retreat, I really felt their presence more than I do normally. Like I've now been in the house without them here for like a year and a half, especially without my father. My mother's been gone 10 years. So I'm used to that her presence isn't here, but somehow in the retreat with the silence, they were around and I really missed them. You know, there were times I thought about it, but you're not, you know, so there's a sadness with that of grief, but I'm not ruled by the grief anymore over my mother and what she went through and my father. The grief ends. Is important to know in the death process, to know that the grieving ends. There's some people that never let it go. So again, I could recall my parents and remember them using parts of the house where my mother would be sitting, and I could have a wish of like, oh, I wish dad were there on the sofa and I could just tell him about this thing that like that. But it doesn't pull my heart out of me and then cripple me where I can't do any meditation the rest of the day because I'm sobbing like that. So again, some people are moved by, you know, their victimhood. This is what defines them like that. So it's really not helpful because you're very focused once again on yourself. He talks about now to talk about this, to practice in the following 2 ways, okay? And it's broken down into different categories. One part is reject the state of mind exclusively desiring not to have suffering. Well, how about that one? Again, reject the state of mind exclusively desiring not to have suffering. It's a big step. It's a big step in Lojong, okay? So you're gonna determine or ascertain again and again the uselessness, the harmfulness of considering suffering as something negative, something unfavorable, okay? And be aware of how much anxiety you experience from aversion to it. Think about that. So we have to explore in meditation. You want to explore, pick up some suffering that you've had in the past week or the past month. Whether you want to look at the whole COVID period, if you feel like you've been really suffering through that, there's all kinds of different suffering. But look how it creates. So I've got a friend right now who has a teenage daughter who later this year will enter high school. She had to apply to get into this high school. It's a really big deal, this high school, very academic, you know, quite intense. She got in. She just found out she got in. Well, leading up to that, the anxiety that she had about getting in was just the dominant theme in their family. So we've all been there. We all know these scenes, whether you're applying to college or a certain psychology program or whatever it is, and you want to get in and you want to be approved and you want people to like you. There's this rite of initiation, right? So her daughter, I'm close with her daughter. She wants to talk to me to get her mind oriented. And I'm so proud of her. She wants to go into a Buddhist thing, how to get oriented to enter this high school with a balanced mind. Good for her. To seek help like that. Fantastic, right? So I'm going to talk with her. So, but think about your own state of how much anxiety you've created for yourself, okay? Because this thing's going to happen, okay? I know people right now, I don't know how many of you, maybe I'll just, let me get I'm going to look at the whole screen here. How many of you are anxious about getting the vaccine? Like you're trying to get it, but you can't get it yet. Is there anybody there? Okay, I'm also one. I'm not really anxious about it, but I'm you know, thinking I might get it. Everybody else is not planning to get it, or you've already gotten it, or you're pretty mellow about it. Okay. So what happens is where I'm living, oh, that's so cute. Sarah has a little mask on her face. Okay. Where I'm living, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have a very poor vaccine system. If you look at the New York Times chart of the maps, we're like light yellow, which isn't good. You want to be like dark green or something. So we're not doing well. And my county is one of the worst. So here I am, I'm like, what am I going to do? Now, what I could do, there's neighbors of mine, people that I know living here that are, you know, getting up at 4 a.m. when they heard that site might open and the appointments might be available, and they're waking up at midnight and they're trying, you know, and I got an email from someone today saying how anxious they are and checking and obsessing and trying to get these appointments. And I'm like, is it worth, you know, like, of course you want to get it. We will get it. It'll happen if you want it at some point. We just have to be patient. So think about things in your life like that we create a whole stew of stuff and you miss all the present. You miss enjoying, like it's almost spring here and it's going to be really beautiful soon. And tomorrow is going to be a gorgeous day, a really nice day. So do I want to spend my day making all these phone calls and leaving messages and calling and checking back and checking the phone again? And you're out on a walk and you're checking and you're checking and you're checking, right? Many problems like that. So we want to keep thinking about stuff like that. Okay, she said she got her second injection on Friday. Okay, I rejoice. For me, it's going to be like Christmas, believe me. Okay, so just think about how we solidify the suffering, rejecting that state of mind. Okay, I don't want the suffering. I don't want the suffering. Okay, train yourself to develop great courage and experience powerfully the thought that from now on, whatever suffering comes, I'm not going to be anxious. You can tell your mind that I'm not going to be anxious about this over and over. Now, you might say it the first few times, but the wave and the familiarity, the trench of anxiety is still there. So the anxiety is going to come up, but the more you raise your head into, I'm not going to be subjected to that. I'm not falling under the sway of that anxiety. I'm not going there. You know, many of us have talked ourselves into things that we never thought we could do. Just that power, the presence. Think about developing great courage. Can you train yourself to develop great courage? Everybody can. Everybody can. That. And I know in the book, Big Love, and a little bit, it reminded me of when I was at Vajrapani and even Milarepa Center in Vermont. But what the students said is they were pushed so far by Lama Yeshe. He had such a huge mind, all these ideas of, I mean, how did the FPMT end up with like 160 centers around the world, right? So all the things he wanted the students to do, the things he wanted the center to do, and some of them said, I didn't think I could do it. And then Lama and Rinpoche says this a lot. If there was a stupa being made at Land of Medicine Buddha years ago for a past director of Vajrapani who passed away. And Rinpoche said he wanted this stupa made, a smaller stupa, but made in 10 days. And we were already on a retreat with Rinpoche at Vajrapani, like a month-long retreat. And the people that he asked to do it, the 3 people, one of them said, well, 10 days, Rinpoche, what if we can't do it? That was what he said. What if we can't do it? And Rinpoche said, that thought doesn't exist. So we talk ourselves into limitation with thoughts like that. Lama didn't have thoughts like that. When you read the book, everything is just, let's just do it. Let's just try and do it. Let's just make it happen. And then if it didn't happen, it didn't happen, but there's another idea that we're going to make happen. So think about for yourself, like, what is it that you need great courage for? What's challenging in your life? I mean, Sheila at the beginning mentioned she was undertaking a home renovation or something, a home project. Great. And sometimes you're kind of ready to engage in something and you're like, okay, I know that I'm going to need to let go of all the workman stuff and let go of that and not be worried about that and get this. I know it's going to be a project, and you can do it. And you can do it. We have to do it. Why? It makes you happier and more peaceful. So work on this next week. Like, think about, look how the suffering comes. Instead of me focus on, I don't want suffering, I don't want suffering. Oh my God, I'm going to suffer. What if I get COVID? What if I go into the store? I forgot to use my hand sanitizer. I forgot to do, I forgot to check this with the car. I forgot to do this I forgot to recharge my subway card, or what, think about all that anxiety and just say, what do I need to do? I can face this. I can do it. So why get mired in suffering, and why get mired in, I don't want suffering to come? I can handle it. I can handle what's going to come. Okay. This is broken down. There's a couple different categories under this first one of rejecting the state of mind, desiring not to have suffering. The first one is the uselessness of considering suffering as something unfavorable. And wait, before I go on, I just want to check. Sometimes I forget to do any questions right now on anything I've been saying. Any confusion, anything at all. Leah, please. Leah, where are you?
New York City. Right.
New York City.
Yeah, this could be my lack of experience, but something that's been a struggle in meditating and reading, texts along the way has been how, I guess the Buddha is interpreted or depicted. I have a hard time figuring out, even at the beginning when you were reciting, as a visual, being. That's kind of where I usually get a block, rather than as more of an idea. And I'm having a hard time understanding what exactly the Buddha really is in the first place.
Okay, well, you're not alone. So the Buddha, on one level, we actually talk about the Buddha's mind being one of the qualities is it's inconceivable. The Buddha mind is inconceivable. And so to give you an idea, you first of all want to think about having all of your positive qualities fully manifest. So let's take wisdom, compassion, loving kindness. All of those would be fully manifest every single moment you're breathing. That's part of it, all those good qualities. And you could go on and on listing the good qualities. But the other thing that's inconceivable is the level of knowledge. I don't mean like intellectual knowledge, but the knowledge from wisdom. So as a result of that the Buddha has, the Buddha knows your past, present, and future karma. He has that in his mind, but he has it for all living beings in every world system. That's inconceivable. I don't even know what I had for breakfast yesterday, okay? But so it's kind of something that is hard to get your mind around. Like, I can't conceive of, everybody's mind, their past lives, where they're going, right? And it simultaneously. So it's a big state of mind. It's a big state of mind, enlightened consciousness. I'll use another word. Somebody who's, Buddha is fully awakened being. One level of what it means, someone who's purified all the negative tendencies and completely enhanced every positive quality.
Is it a someone, or is it like a God in a puritanical sense, or is it all of us? And if it is a singular consciousness, then I get caught up in like the he of it, like as in like them having personal pronouns and that being somehow relevant.
What did you just say? The line before?
Referring to the Buddha using pronouns. It's like, is that right? Does that actually work, or is that just a failing of the language? Or
sure, there was a historical Buddha 2,600 years ago in our world system, Shakyamuni Buddha, but he's only one of 1,000 Buddhas of what they call the fortunate eon. So meaning, I'm not going to go into this a lot, but the fortunate eon is, there's many different eons if you go into Buddhist cosmology and like that. So basically Shakyamuni Buddha is the one that caught our world system, happened to get enlightened. And these are the teachings that he disseminated. But there were Buddhas before him that taught in another time. There's Buddhas after him. Maitreya will be the next Buddha. But Maitreya doesn't teach Tantra. So right now we have every perfect opportunity. So I wouldn't get so much caught up in, there was a historical Buddha, but there could be many Buddhas walking around.
But it is one being.
Well, there was Shakyamuni Buddha, but there's many Buddhas.
Right.
There's not just one being. There's male, female, it could be a dog, it could be, there's all kinds of stories like that. It could be a flower.
But the Shakyamuni Buddha is one being, like the Shakyamuni Buddha specifically?
Shakyamuni Buddha is one being, a historical person who was a prince in India.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's hard to figure out how to think about it.
Sure, absolutely. And it might be good also, if you don't have a lot of background in Buddhism, to do an intro course at like an earlier course with Shantideva, so you can get the background and things like that. And then you'll hear much more about that.
I actually do have the I know the information about them. It's just hard, like, because later on when you get into it more, it's like, is it person? Like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time with the singularness. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, I wouldn't worry about the singularness because there's many Buddhas. So there isn't just one. I mean, he was one person, like you're one person and I'm another person. So, and they don't really say there's a collective enlightened consciousness. I've heard debates about it, but generally you and your consciousness is what gets enlightened individually. But, what is that enlightened consciousness like? Of course, it's all interconnected in some way, right? But we as individuals will manifest still as an individual. I just sometimes think of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche Lama Zopa Rinpoche is still alive, is, clearly an extraordinary being with a very high level of realization. Is he a Buddha? I don't know, but sometimes I think he is, and I prefer to just think of him that way. And so I think there's many enlightened beings like that.
Oh, okay.
Could be a taxi driver in Manhattan.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions, comments on what we're discussing, the text or anything? Anything? Buddhism in a nutshell. Thank you. Sunny is, because that has information about the Buddha as well. And you can have a look at that. That's in the chat. Thank you. Okay, let's go back to this first part. Under, how do I reject, that I don't want to have suffering? How do I get rid of that thought that I don't want to suffer? So one part is the uselessness of considering suffering as something unfavorable. This, again, mind training. These are things we never think about. What do you mean suffering's not unfavorable? Are you kidding me? This is really the key of mind training. You're completely shifting your mind into a different consciousness. This is what makes you happy. This is what makes you happy. But it is completely different thinking. It's different thinking. So the text goes on, if you can cure the suffering, then you don't need to be unhappy. If you cannot change it, there's no benefit from being unhappy about it. This is the famous line His Holiness sometimes quotes. And, if you can do something about the problem, do it. You don't need to be unhappy, you just take action. If you can't do anything about it, let it go. So again, if I can fix the suffering, why do I need to be unhappy about it? So think if you can work with it this week. Notice your mind with certain things when suffering comes up. Make notes, jot something down. I know a lot of people they show up at a class one and they never think about it all week. Change your mind, transform your mind. Really spend some time reflecting on this. It's really, really helpful. Read the text over if you want. Read the text over a few times and think about, and just take one little part. If I can fix this problem, why dwell on being unhappy? Okay. And if I can't really change it, why be unhappy? Right? I have to accept sometimes. What was the thing recently? I was, I can't think. People make jokes about, I don't know how many, maybe not so many New Yorkers, they don't own cars, but the jokes about you're getting the crank call that your car's warranty, like they have your phone number, or you're getting calls about your student loan. This is the last time we're going to call you that your student loan is set to expire or something, right? I don't know if any of you have gotten these spam calls that can be annoying, and even if you've signed up for a do not call list. And I was just talking to my brother about that, of something, and I'm like, well, what can you do? I just hang up. Like, what can I do? But some people get really angry. And it's like, well, this is life. With a phone, you're going to have spam, and it's just going to happen like that. So again, think about it. There's no reason to be unhappy with any of this. It's useless. Think about it, it's useless. Okay. Number 2, the second part, great harm. The great harm of considering suffering as something unfavorable. So not only the uselessness of that, but the great harm. Okay. If you do not feel anxious, your strength of mind can help you bear even great sufferings easily. Again, going back to the great courage, you'd be amazed what you are able to do. You would be amazed what you can bear, right? We often limit ourselves so much. It's incredible. It's incredible. We just so much have these negative thoughts about ourselves, the low self-esteem over and over. I can't do that. I don't, and then the laziness sets in, and then you feel guilty, and then you ruminate through that. And then there you are again, over and over the same. That becomes a routine for you. That becomes a habit. That's why retreat is so helpful, because it interrupts that. It interrupts you. You change some of your activities during the day. You lessen all that external stuff, turn off all the distractions, and you spend a little bit more time quietly with your mind, and you're hitting a reset button. I really feel this past month, I definitely hit a reset button. And so far, I'm just out of retreat, just one day, but, so far I'm able to maintain, still doing deeper level practice, maintaining a certain awareness of my mind like that, just at my baby level, really like that. So again, if you don't feel anxious, your strength of mind can help you to bear even great sufferings easily. Absolutely. And the sufferings feel light and flimsy, like cotton. Because of anxiety, you're ceaselessly oppressed by unhappy feelings, and even small sufferings become intolerable. So think about when that's happened to you. How we get caught up in the anxiety, becomes more and more, I could just see my friend, this teenage girl, how like that's one thing, but we carry it into adulthood. It's not just teenage girls, right? I'm not laying a trip on teenage girls. I think they're great, but that they can, you can get into this hysteria. Adults do the same thing if they're patterned to do it. And some people that, some emergency happens and they're very calm. They're just like, okay, well, and then other people, there's no calm in the room at all, okay? So, and here he goes on with an example. If you're thinking of a beautiful man or woman, even if you try to get rid of desire, okay, you will only exhaust yourself. Likewise, by concentrating on the painful characteristics of suffering, you can't develop patience. Okay, so patience in Tibetan system, it's really more accurately translated as forbearance. Forbearance. When we think of patience, it's like I'm waiting on hold, and it's like, okay, I'm sitting here waiting on hold. Okay. But forbearance is when you're bearing up under harsh circumstances. That's really patience, bearing up under adversity. And it could be different levels of adversity. So again, if I just focus on the painful characteristics of suffering, I don't want the suffering, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, right? I'm not going to be able to bear up under it. So in the case of instructions on sealing the doors of the faculties, you should not concentrate your mind on the characteristics of suffering, but you should become experiences in keeping your mind in its normal condition in its own state. So rather than totally wallowing in these characteristics of suffering over and over and over, you know, when it says sealing the doors of the faculties, your sense faculties of protecting your mind, protecting your own, meaning, you know, what kinds of things do you read? You know, do you actually read any real books, or is it all online stuff? Is it snippets of different social media things? You know, that things that historical stories that you believe, that it leaves an imprint in your mind. What do you watch on TV? Do you watch a lot of TV? What kind of films do you watch if you watch films? So just noting these influences that come in, what kind of people do you hang out with? Kind of activities. So you can see that level of, maybe I'm not protected because I'm hang out with some bad people. You know, maybe watching too much of this on social media and continuing to just stream through, you know, somebody I was working with was addicted to YouTube videos, just at night, just over and over these garbage videos. They would just watch little snippets of this and this and this, and, you know, and try to go to sleep with that. Difficult, really difficult. So again, keeping the mind in a more stable, you know, in the mind in its own natural state. How do we find that? Meditation. The mind in its natural state, meaning, you know, it's nice to just sit sometimes. And I really liked, recently I saw a video, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Some of you have heard of her. She's an English nun. She is the one that the book Cave in the Snow is written about. She did a retreat for 12 years in India in a cave. Very impressive. And she's a really beautiful being. I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche said she had realized bodhicitta. And she's a friend of mine, and I haven't seen her in years, but she recently taught for our center in Northwest India, Tushita. You could probably go on to their site and find her video. And they had a special LOSAR program of different teachers that taught. And she was saying that for Westerners, our minds are so busy to meditate. She said, it's best to just, when you start, is you just relax. You don't just plunk down on a seat and all wired up. I'm meditating now, forcing yourself. You relax, just go with the breathing a little bit, empty your mind. And slowly you just see the nature of the mind arise. See the nature of the mind arise, you know, in its clarity, in its awareness. That's all. Rather than me, again, I don't want suffering. I don't want suffering. Oh, this suffering is going to come. This is terrible. It's a terrible thing. It's just kind of the natural state of things is not like that at all with your mind. So just looking at that first point with suffering, if you can train your mind a little bit like that, let's look a little bit at what happens with death. And what do we want to think about with death? So traditionally in Tibetan Buddhism, they have 6 disadvantages if you're not thinking about death. And there's 6 advantages to thinking about death. Our culture, our society, certainly prior to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the 60s, who broke open the death and dying movement, where you could talk about death and read books about it. And it was really a taboo subject. And that's even waltzed into our modern days right now. And I remember some years ago when I was getting into Buddhism and I was talking to my mother about some of the principles and saying there was a relative that was dying and my mother was saying how horrible, and saying also that her children weren't going to tell her that she was dying of cancer, this woman that was dying. And I just thought that was absurd. And I said to my mother, oh, that's one of my waking thoughts, is that this could be my last day. And she said, oh, it's so morbid that you think that way. Okay. So again, we're kind of patterned to thinking this, that we shouldn't discuss it. We shouldn't think about it. But the thing is, if you do think about it now, okay? It wakes up your practice. You first of all, you intend to practice. You actually do practice with some power, positive intention, with some rigor, you know, and they say things like it's good in the beginning, middle, and end, meaning it wakes up your practice in the beginning, whether it's the beginning of your life or the beginning of your getting into your practice. In the middle, it sustains your practice by thinking about death. Because in the middle of your practice, when you're going at it for some years, things can get kind of dry. You kind of plateau and you go, I'm not really making any progress. So then when you think about death, you go, well, okay, I need to just step it up a notch. And certainly in the end of your practice, the end of life, that's what's going to be there, your practice, okay? And the last advantage really is you don't die with any regrets. You don't die with any regrets. So that would be nice, very peaceful. Then there's disadvantages of not thinking about death. And these are pretty obvious as well, that you're not going to practice, you're going to put your practice off. And if you do practice, you're not going to practice that well. Your practice will lack luster, you know, all those kinds of things. You know, you'll end up probably, you know, engaging in some negative activity. Doesn't really matter, like that. And then dying with regret. So it's something to look at in our changing our mind, transforming our mind, and thinking about our relationship with suffering, and in this sense, how that relates to our death. Can I transform my view a little bit, my attitude a little bit? And then we also talk about the 9-point death meditation. So we're going to look at that in subsequent sessions. Okay. Any questions right now before we close? So I'm just curious for a moment, what do you think about this mind training? Possible? It's a big step to think of, I'm not really going to label suffering as a problem. Think about getting that space in your life. I'm not really going to continue to label suffering as a problem. I'm going to try to, you know, reject that idea is what he's saying. Can you work with that this week? And an interesting part is, I think for deeper practitioners, I had a friend some years ago in Santa Cruz, longtime practitioner. And at one point we were, you know, you compare with your friends, like, how's it going for you? Have you done this retreat? What are you doing? And what are you working on now? And he said to me at one point, he goes, now I'm welcoming suffering. He said, now I'm really, you know, so you're not a masochist. You want to understand the real thinking. You're not a masochist. But what he's saying is, you see how the problems transform you and you're using them. So to some degree, you're starting to say, like, bring it on, because it purifies you. And we need a lot of purification to become a Buddha. You know, especially all of us, we've had pretty easy lives. We've had good lives. And, you know, and one of my friends some years ago said, you know, we need to suffer. Okay, but again, not in a masochistic way, not causing suffering for yourself or others. But when it comes, you're kind of like, okay, buckle your seatbelt, here it comes. You know, sometimes I've seen where I've seen something coming and I'll think like, okay, buckle your seatbelt. This is going to be quite a ride. Day one for me at Milarepa Center, when I was director, I was really like, this is going to be a ride, right? So can you kind of sink your teeth into it and say, yep, again, forbearance. I'm developing the great courage. I'm going to handle this. I'm going to do this. We can do it. We can do it. And if I can, and so Mike, does suffering exist from its own side? We are going to tackle that in future sessions. Thank you. That was a comment he made, because that gets into the ultimate truth, how we're going to deal with it with ultimate truth. Okay. But so what I'd like you to work on this week, please, if you can, read the text if you want, and just think about, what great courage are you developing? Can you start to look at, I'm not buying into that suffering is a problem. I'm not going to buy into the negativity of suffering. I'm not going to continue to say, I'm going to see it as an opportunity. There's an opportunity here for me to purify and transform my mind. Keep working like that. And let me know if you have any questions, or I'd love to hear some of your exercises through that. So we're going to go back. I'm going to share my screen to go back to some dedication prayers. I would like to invest whatever positive energy we've created from our time together. And thank you so much for joining. And thank you to Shanti Davis Center. I'd like to dedicate right now to all the beings suffering with COVID. May they be fully recovered immediately. For beings who have died, may they take a precious human rebirth to get enlightened, to benefit others. And I'd also like to dedicate to Peter K., who's been on my prayer list for a while, and he passed away last Saturday from pancreatic cancer in Vermont. And Norma Harris, who's in my area with cancer. I'd like to dedicate to her well-being. And Carol Montgomery Hansen, who is another student, Patty Hansen's mother, who just died also, I think on the same day that Peter did, of old age, 91. And she passed away in Oklahoma. So I'd like to dedicate to her, Carol Montgomery Hansen, like that. And so we're going to do some dedication prayers, and I will share my screen. So feel free to join me. So we are on, let me just make this bigger. Here we go. Let's read in English. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the, whoops, come back. Always have a little trouble with these prayers. Here we go. Due to the merits of the 3 times collected by me, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and all other sentient beings. So this is reflecting on emptiness. Just think about this, whatever understanding you have of emptiness, which are totally non-existent from their own side. May the I, which is also totally non-existent from its own side, achieve Guru Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment, which is also totally non-existent from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are totally non-existent from their own side to that enlightenment, which is totally non-existent from its own side, by myself alone. Totally non-existent from its own side, totally empty. Just reflect for a moment on empty, any understanding you have of emptiness. And the long life prayers. Let's see, they are here. For His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you so much for this evening. I look forward to seeing you next week. If you want a little quick snippet, Tuesdays at noon, you can find that on my website. I'll just put my website here. And there's a lot of other programs coming up as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention, oh wait, one moment. commercial advertisement. Some of you know I'm doing this. So I'm doing a purification practice on the side right now. It's a great COVID activity. I'm making images of the Buddha called tsatsas. I have a few molds. I've been doing this for, I just started again after a 16-year absence. And Rinpoche had given me to make 200,000 images. This is 20. So I'm closing in on 200,000. I've got 22,000 more images to make. So if you would like these, there's different kinds. I'm packing up like an assorted box. I will mail to you if you can just cover the shipping. And the shipping is $21.90. Support our local postal service. So if you're interested, go to my website and send me an email with your address that you're interested in doing it. And I will send you an assorted box like that if you're interested. And you can give them as gifts. You can offer them to people. I'll send you instructions about them, what they are, and how to take care of them, because it is a sacred thing. They all have a blessed bead in the back of them from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that you have to have something inside. So it's like a consecrated, it's a holy spiritual thing like that. And they're coming out really nicely in different colors like that. So it's been fun. Thank you, everyone. Please be well and be happy. Please be happy and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.